Yeah, so my goal is to, I'm also a data nerd. My goal is to kind of communicate the best, most recent data as I know them in regards to pediatric injury prevention, pediatric gun violence injury. Yep. So, quick facts. In 2016, more children under 5 were killed than law enforcement officers in the line of duty. We have, since 1963, 3 times as many children and teens have been killed on American soil by guns as opposed to soldiers in hostile wars. The argument that guns make me safer in the home or I'm going to protect my home doesn't hold water. For every time time a gun is used to protect a home, 11 attempted suicide or completed suicide attempts are done, 7 criminal assaults or homicides are committed, and there are 4 unintentional shootings, deaths, or injuries. It's staggering how much less safe we are with guns in the home. Some of you have seen this slide before, but we are a ridiculous outlier relative to other developed nations. I like this graph because it shows just that the self-harm by itself is bigger than every other country in the world, and then if you were to reduce that, we'd still be higher than every other developed country. It's sad and criminal because it's easy access to firearms. So Dr. Barros made a great point. So this is the over the last 16 years, so from 1999 to 2016. These are the top 10 causes of mortality in pediatrics for ages 0 to 19. Didn't come through quite right, but basically most things are steady or very slightly declining. Our number 2 here is firearm-related injury. This is motor vehicle crash, a mortality rate, dramatic changes, and it's not that we just drove better, right? No, obviously this is regulation. And the way to change the game here is to change how we regulate guns because it is something that can be regulated. It can be safer. All the media attention, is drawn towards mass shootings. That is the thing that galvanized Connecticut. That is the thing that galvanized a lot of you showing up. What started Moms Demand Action. But it is a drop in the bucket relative to the carnage that's happening every single day around this country. It is not from mass shootings. So this is each figure represents 20 shooting deaths, and this is the number of 1,876 non-mass shooting pediatric deaths in 1 year. For people who are motivated by the money question, it costs a bunch of money to take care of this many injuries. 20,000 children per year have to show up to the ER. That's around 16 children a day are hospitalized with a firearm injury, costing $330 million a year, the most recent estimate. And the morbidity that lasts after a hospitalization, if you do survive, is 50% of the children will have a long-lasting morbidity after discharge. And just know that the story that if a child attempts one way of one version of suicide will go on to a different form of suicide is just not true. And so when boys who attempt suicide by firearm, they're far more successful than say trying to do it by poisoning or strangulation or something like that. They don't go on to try again because they don't have the opportunity with firearms. But if you do attempt suicide by ingestion, it is not true that you go on to be successful in some other way.
Question, does CCMC have these same number of statistics? I would imagine this is a nationwide.
It's a nationwide trend. These are nationwide numbers. These data are from all inpatients in the entire United States from a random sampling.
So do you see as many at CCMC?
16. So this is 16 a day in the nation. So I mean, okay. It's not like not every single hospital. Okay. The ward isn't quite filled. with the gun injuries. But the problem is that, as a hospitalist, I don't see them, right?
Okay.
They don't make it to me. They die in the ER. So, this is just gives you a sense of, geographic distributions of firearms in the United States. Around a third of children live in a home with access to a gun. It's kind of stable around 40% nationally. The Northeast does have a lower rate of gun ownership, but nationally it's a very high rate. So who we're using this. There are two. Pediatrics is a broad category, of course. So younger children, as you might guess, are more likely unintentional accidental injuries. I would say, avoidable injuries, right? If they were properly secured with ammunition stored in a separate place with the gun lock on, there wouldn't be a toddler shooting someone ever, right? But it does happen. While adolescents are more likely to be intentional injuries, or whether homicide or suicide. So in 2015, on average, a toddler in America shoots someone. These numbers are 19 toddlers have inadvertently killed themselves, 25 have injured themselves, 13 injured other people, and 2 killed other people. Toddlers. That's not a thing that should happen. So what percent of children under 10 live in a home with a gun and knows where that gun is stored? We're gonna go with 90%. 90%? Seems like a lot. Anyone vote something different? 70. We all assume it's high because it's up on a slide and this is the gun violence law. You guys are passing tests. 73% of children who live in a home with a gun know where it is, and 36% have held it. If you want some really dark videos, you can watch. There's like a 2020 or Dateline video that you can Google where they literally prime kids saying, "Hey, if you find a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult, don't pull the trigger. Just find someone." And it's wildly ineffective. They put the kids in a one-way mirror room. They go find a gun. They immediately pull the trigger. It's it happens all the time. So this is from the statefirearmslaw.gov. This is a scale of the number of gun safe provisions, the laws that make us safer type thing. So you can see Connecticut, we're really high. We're in the 86. California has 101 laws, and this is a gradient. But more laws don't necessarily mean anything, or do they? We're not sure. So let's see if there's this study tried to see if the correlations between these laws. And so, using statistics, they said yes. The problem is, the states that choose to make more gun laws are also the states that are actively trying to go against this. There's a little bit of a fallacy of just the states that want more gun laws get more gun laws and are likely are safer. So there are other studies that went on to try and test this similar question of what gun laws are effective and do more gun laws make us safer? And there's a good correlation here that was significant. That philosophy of measuring number of laws and the quality of those laws is the undergirding of the Giffords gun scorecard. So Connecticut is as of 2019 had 2018 into 2019 hasn't taken effect of all of the new gun laws that were passed in the past year. But we are an A-, number 3 in the United States by the Giffords scorecard, and likely are higher even now because it might be on this next slide. But the gun laws that we don't have, we actually passed one of them in the past year with the safe storage law. So the law, some of the laws that have been shown to be effective, not just a correlational thing, but actually, from point A to point B, did we actually change things? So universal background checks actually decreases homicide deaths. Banning ownership if there's been a violent misdemeanor, like Dr. Barrows was saying, does between 18 increase decrease. And then you can increase in homicide rates or shall issue laws, which are laws that say like, if I show up to a police station asking for a gun license, there's a thing that says you shall issue, like basically you must give me a gun license. And so that increases those rates, so we shouldn't pass that. And then this is related to the red flag laws, essentially. The forfeiture of if there's domestic violence restraining orders is a very similar thing, that it does decrease intimate partner violence homicides by 14%. And the CAP laws, so the Child Accident Prevention laws, one of the laws that was passed last year here in Connecticut, it does lead to an 18% reduction in all firearm fatalities, a 26% reduction in homicides, and a reduction in unintentional firearm deaths, which is why it was so great that I think Ethan's law, that was passed last year. As a researcher, this is one of the reasons why we lack so much of the data to argue what should be done, what the best laws are, because everyone's been doing this unfunded research. So this is a graph of the top causes of mortality in the United States, showing the number of publications and versus mortality rate, and you can see that almost all injuries are a little bit of an outlier for the amount of mortality caused to people in the United States versus the number of people actually writing science about it. And the reason for that is funding. So this is number of publications versus funding over time. And you can see that a lot of people are publishing about HIV, diabetes, atherosclerosis, heart disease, and gun violence has no funding and no one's publishing on it as a direct result of that. So thankfully we're starting to push forward at the NIH and the CDC to finally get funding for gun violence research. But this is why we're we're just in the dark about what the best things are to reduce gun violence and injury.
So we should be seeing your name up there soon.
Yeah, I hope so. So the medical professions have seen this call to action. The AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the various major journals of all have seen this as a call to action to try and make healthcare providers and researchers do something different. The AAP, again, Pediatric Association, put out a policy statement that all pediatricians should advocate for better firearm laws, provide health information for parents, educate the next generation of pediatricians, and research related to firearm injury. They're obviously not the only people who put out policy statements similar to this, but they're my people. So that is yeah.
Dr. Hogan, wasn't there some situation, I don't know what it is, at National Health that specifically impedes research on gun statistics?
Yes. So basically there was a policy put in place in '94 or so that prevented the CDC from using any money to appear to advocate for gun safety measures. That seems to have lifted in the last 2 or 3 years, and then this past year was the first year they received funding to prospectively actually study this. So a group in Michigan got a very large grant to start pediatric specific research on this. I think it's called Project Affirm. They've got a great website for pediatric gun violence stuff. And then just this last year, this last funding cycle, they just signed in $25 million to the NIH specifically to study gun violence, which is excellent. So the AP's goals, stronger gun laws between background checks, banning assault weapons, address firearm trafficking, encouraging safe storage, opposing weakening gun laws, of course, generally violence prevention programs, and then increasing research funding. They got half of what they wanted, but it's better than nothing for multiple decades. So I think that's a win. And then teaching people how to and provide disability guidance to prevent firearm injuries and, of course, improving mental health care access.
When was that funding granted?
Literally like
Maybe
6 months ago, like
just signed into law.
Yeah, it just happened. The ASK campaign is a shorter acronym than Be Smart, but it's the same same part and parcel concept. So asking saves kids. The goal is you're going on a play date, you're going to somewhere else, and do you have allergies? Do you have a dog? Do you have guns in your home? Okay, is the ammunition stored separately? Is there a gun lock on? These are common phrases that should be common parlance for all of us. The Be Smart campaign, I think, is a little more fleshed out. They have a huge website that you can go to. Great video by Melissa Joan Hart. It's a very funny YouTube about how to do Be Smart. So I would recommend looking at that too. And that was my first meeting. That's my daughter, Grace. She has a lot more hair now. But she is one of the reasons that I'm standing here. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hogan. That was eye-opening information, I think. Sorry to put my back to you. Let me come on up here. Just wanted to mention to everybody, if you're anything like me, I want to go back over that again. And there was a lot of good information. So good news, SCTV is here tonight filming the entire thing. So this will be available on Simsbury Community Television. Thank you. So I just want to say on that ask, since I got involved in this, I started thinking about where my kids are going, and I was very protective. And the first time or two that I had to ask a play date, my child was coming over, do you have any guns in the home? I was a little nervous to ask, how am I going to sound? Am I overprotective? And I was really amazed that 5 out of 5 times, the mom said to me, thank you so much for asking. I should be asking that question, and I'm not asking that question. And do you mind if I use what you said? And I said, please do. I think that it's an important question to ask to keep our kids safe.
I also found our kids are older now, but offering the information.
Mm-hmm.
If I invite someone over, I'm going to introduce that and say, I want you to know that in our home, and that often got the same response like, oh, thank you. Now, so almost relieving someone of needs to ask.
That's a great point. I love it. So speaking about, Dr. Hogan showed a lot of things that have happened to reduce gun violence over the years. Speaking about that, there's so much that can be done. I think that one of my kind of biggest pet peeves is when someone says to me, really, what are you going to do? You can't really do anything to help. And I think we can all see that there are things we can do. And speaking on that, I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker, who is his first time being with us. So thank you so much. Since 2012, our Simsbury State Representative John Hampton. Thank you.
Good evening, all of you. Thank you what a great crowd. Thank you, Meredith, and thank you, Dana, for organizing this. Thank you to First Church for hosting us, SCTV for filming us. I wanted to recognize one of our newly elected selectmen, Wendy Maxtudis, this year.
Hi.
So it's great to have her support. And I'm so glad to stand with Moms Demand Action. So I was elected in 2012 to the Connecticut State House of Representatives. It's an honor to represent Simsbury at the state capitol. So I had knocked about 6,000 doors that year. Was celebrating with a friend on December 14th of that year, sitting in a restaurant about 50 feet from the bar. I saw the TV come on, and my friend and I are squinting at the TV, and something about Sandy Hook, and 1 death and 2 deaths, and all of a sudden I knew that destiny had handed Connecticut a summons to action. And little did I know, those 6,000 doors, no one ever mentioned gun control to me, gun violence. And so that set the stage for my first term in the State House. And I had no experience with firearms. I can hardly handle my phone, dropping it.
I don't even know where it is.
But I knew I wanted to do it right. With all issues, I wanted to get educated on the issue. So I knew how I was leaning in response to this epic tragedy. But I wanted to do my homework, so I went to the gun range and held a gun, took one apart, went hunting, talked to a lot of Second Amendment experts, and of course met with the family members themselves, which was just epic. There were a lot of epic moments. Our first caucus after the shooting, we were all, I don't know, there was about, at that time, maybe 70 of us, 80 of us in a room. All the legislators, Democratic legislators, were caucusing about the issue and how horrible it was that 20 plus children and adults had been massacred this way. And it got really quiet until the head of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus got up and said, "This is a horrible tragedy, but in my district this happens every day," of Hartford. And I felt this big. And that was my aha moment, that it's so easy to get very, especially in a town like Simsbury, when our biggest issues are bears and statues, and somebody called me about the big Y and those are the big issues. I'm like, wow, guys, just over the mountain are some really scary statistics relative to gun violence. And so in 2013, we banded together in largely bipartisan manner to address the issue. Really great leadership by then Governor Malloy and our Speaker of the House, Brendan Sharkey, and Majority Leader Joe Arasimowicz, now Speaker. I, at the time, was on the Public Safety Subcommittee, so we did take in some of the proposed legislation. That was an 18-hour hearing on this bill that we ultimately passed. The night we passed that bill, usually after, it's chaotic, as some of you know, you come in the chamber and it's just crazy. But you could just pin drop silence and a few sobs. And we all just walked out of that chamber just knowing that we had made a tremendous step toward progress and prevention of future tragedies. But again, they have happened continuously in other parts of our country. Luckily, Connecticut leads the way in terms of our gun legislation since that horrific day. And I do remember where I was on the lottery shooting day. That was another horrific event. But circumstances cause us to be vigilant. This year with the sad death of Ethan Song, we led to passage of Ethan's Law for the safer storage of firearms at people's homes. And we passed legislation for safer storage of guns in cars. And we also banned bump stock guns. Right after we passed that, it was reminding me that someone was pulled over or arrested for creating, the ghost gun. That's the ghost gun legislation. So this year on the horizon, we certainly will be supporting your agenda. Lots of us be happy to, especially regarding the risk warrant legislation. Constantly working on mental health legislation. There's a few suicide prevention bills in this year. It's great that Dr. Hogan mentioned that it's a continued problem in our state and in our nation, that issue needs to be addressed in tandem. But again, we have to be vigilant because every day there seems to be a new horrific way to maim and kill our most vulnerable and some of the most horrible places, like our schools and churches. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the process and how you can get more involved. Ideas for legislation this year. We convene on February 5th. This is a short session. So we end on May 5th. So we're hopefully gonna incorporate a lot into a short period of time, but there's that T word that keeps going around, tolls, that might, unfortunately, hopefully we'll deal with that sooner than later, but this is a top priority of mine, and you guys have made it even more personal for me, and all of your hard work. It's the advocacy of groups like yours that make it happen, and showing up at the Capitol and raising your voice is so important. So, any questions?
I have a question. Do you know how many or if all the police departments in Connecticut furnish gun locks free?
Don't know that. It's a good question.
And,
Ours does. Granby does.
Granby, East Granby both.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
One of the most important things I did after joining is to give away 2 gun locks. And that just really, that really struck me as something
We'll
important.
look into Simsbury.
The other thing is, maybe some publicity, because I didn't know about gun locks before that. I didn't know they were available.
Mhm.
I'm not a gun owner, but still. So the other thing would be publicity about what police, where people can get
It's a great idea.
gun locks.
I don't know if that's something you're
Yeah, that'd be something we could definitely work on, or, see if we could work with the police in the town to provide that.
I think East Granby got more just because of the state storage law, so they actually got an extra shipment prior to October 1st, so I would assume that's statewide.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Simsbury was not on top of that, but we'll double check.
Simsbury Police Department does have them. You can go to Project Child Safe, has a website that you can Google guns that free gun lock, and but Simsbury's one, Avon does not.
What other questions could I answer about? Yes, sir, how are you?
Good. John, is there any opportunity at all for conversation with, I'm thinking Colt firearms, with corporate, and this whole initiative can be somehow matched, have a reasonable approach to, as opposed to it's either NRA or it's the highway? And is there anything going on that you're aware of?
No, but I could certainly ask that question and explore that opportunity. Yeah.
I think I read somewhere recently that, something about Ethan's law, which I didn't know, was that the Department of Education was charged with creating a gun safety curriculum for the public schools. And just wondering if there was any idea of what that might look like, and also if there was a date certain by which they were charged with actually developing that program?
Yeah, it does, the Public Act does require programs in the schools. I'm not sure if they need to start, did they start October?
Yeah, so I was looking at that for the Stanford chapter of the Moms Demand Action Group, and they haven't issued it yet, but any time now they'll be releasing it. They were still finalizing it, and that should be published eventually on the Department of Education website.
Okay.
If you guys left your emails, I can definitely share that information with you to distribute, but it's in the process of being finalized. And they might be a little bit behind their original schedule for that.
Thank you.
What else?
The other thing I might mention is next Saturday, the 25th, at the library, we're actually doing a tutorial for how a bill becomes a law. So if anyone wants to learn more about the legislative process, from like the original bill to the public hearing process, that's the 25th at the
Saturday.
library from 10 to 12. for
Yeah, so I get the
interested.
best ideas from constituents, and I'd be glad to forward any bills that Moms Demand Action would like me to forward. This is a committee bill year. In the short session and in the even years, we're not allowed to submit bills on our own. We submit them by request to committees of cognizance. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. There's packets that are out in front that summarize the gun prevention and violence laws that we passed over the years. Take one home. And this is a major issue summary of possible issues we'll be addressing in 2020. And my email and phone are on there, so please feel free to keep in touch with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. John, thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for Jason for all your help here tonight. Really, really appreciate it. We have, yes.
Comment. Sure. My kids are in their 20s now, so it's been a while since they were little, but I also asked when they were going to somebody's house, do you have guns? And I don't own them, I've never touched one, I'm not interested in it, but you gotta be ready for the answer when it's yes. And it did surprise me when a friend of mine said, yes, she does have a gun. It's locked in a cabinet in the garage, and the kids don't know about it. And I felt okay with that. But be ready when you ask the question, or whatever answer you might hear.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really, it's a great point. That the follow-up question is, where is it, right? Is it locked, and and do the children know about it?
And it sounds like we should be able to articulate if they say yes and we don't like the answer, maybe some things they could consider or think about.
Right, exactly. So think ahead to, I know often, my thoughts have been, well, I'll host. Are you comfortable with your child coming to my home? Something like that. That's another great point. So thank you so much for your questions. We do have a final guest speaker here tonight. She's a local attorney. She specializes in the intersection of domestic violence and gun violence. She has twice run for state senator, maybe third time's the charm. It's attorney Melissa Osborne. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Alex. I learned a lot of information from your presentation, so thank you so much. Thank you, Alex. I learned a lot from your presentation. So I may overlap a little bit, and I don't have a pretty PowerPoint, so I may refer to my notes every once in a while. But I'm a family law attorney, and an area of particular interest for me is domestic violence advocacy. And I was a gun sense candidate in 2018. In part, the reason I became a candidate to begin with was when I looked up how my representatives were voting. For various reasons, I found out that my representative, not my state representative, who was fantastic, John Hampton, whose office I was sitting in the very next day, because it was a great representation, thank you, John. I found out that my state senator had voted against the Sandy Hook legislation. And I found out that he had voted against the bill that prohibits us from having access for 16-year-olds and under to semi-automatic weapons. And that really didn't sit right with me, and that's how I kind of ended up in this whole milieu. But as a family law attorney, obviously, there's a lot of intersection of family law cases and domestic violence. So that's become a particular concern of mine with respect to access to guns. And Meredith asked me to give a brief, just a little overview of the Violence Against Women Act, which is a piece of federal legislation that was first funded and enacted in 1994. And that's what really provided the funding and the awareness of domestic violence issues in the United States. And right now it is stalled. It's required for it to be renewed every 3 or 4 years, and it is stalled and it has not been renewed since 2018 during the government shutdown. The funding for it expired, and as of right now, it was passed through the House in 2019, but it is stalled in the Senate on largely partisan reasons. They were trying to expand it to include protections for LGBTQ, for Native American women, for violence against them, and in particular something that's called the boyfriend loophole, which I don't like to say boyfriend because it could be girlfriend, it could be something else. but it is a provision that would expand some of the federal laws to protect people who experience domestic violence from somebody who is not someone they're cohabitating with or not the parent of their child. So that legislation is stalled. It's still getting funding, which is fantastic, but the actual renewal of the law hasn't happened. So I wanted to speak for a minute about some of the domestic violence statistics that make this kind of legislation, both at the federal level and at the state level, so terribly important. And just one statistic to start out with, which is that women in the US are 21 times more likely to be killed with a gun in America than in other high-income countries. So 21 times more likely. We like to say intimate partner violence now instead of domestic, because again, that is expanding the concept that intimate partner violence takes place in areas of more than just the four walls of your home. So an intimate partner violence victim is 5 times more likely to be killed if the abuser has access to a gun. Intimate partner violence assaults involving a gun are 12 times more likely to result in a death than if the violence is perpetrated with a different weapon or bodily harm. Every year, 600 women are shot to death by intimate partners. Of all the women shot to death in the United States, half were shot by their intimate partners. And when it comes to the intersection of domestic violence and mass shootings, 54% of mass shootings where 4 or more people were killed started out with an intimate partner gun death. So domestic violence is really a precursor to and a big red flag for a lot of these other kinds of shootings that really got most of our attention and got us all galvanized. But death isn't the only consequence of intimate partner violence when a gun is used. There are nearly a million women alive today who have been shot by an intimate partner. There are 4.5 million women who report having been threatened by an intimate partner with a gun. And 2/3 of abuse incidents where a gun was reported to be present and the partners cohabitated, in 2/3 of those incident reports, the abuser used the firearm to threaten to kill the partner. But we do know that laws, like we're starting to pass here in Connecticut, and by the way, Connecticut is top-notch in terms of domestic violence, guns, laws, but there's still progress to be made. We do know that laws that restrict abusers' access to firearms really do work. They do save lives. States that restrict access to guns by abusers have seen a 13% reduction in domestic violent firearm homicides. So again, correlation isn't causation, but when you have enough of these reductions, there starts to be more than correlation. You can start to think about causation in there. So states that extend their laws to dating partners, such as the boyfriend loophole I was talking about that is stalled at the federal level, they have a 16% reduction in intimate partner violence gun homicides. And Connecticut does that. Connecticut is doing that right. But states that cover emergency protective orders, in addition to final orders, experience an additional 16% reduction in gun homicides. Now, Connecticut does this. Connecticut passed legislation that does remove guns from people who've had domestic restraining orders placed against them on an emergency basis. But again, the guy I used to run against voted against that bill. So there are a whole bunch of bills, and I'm not going to bore you with more statistics, but there are places that we can improve in Connecticut. For instance, there are 9 states right now that do prohibit possession or purchase after a misdemeanor stalking conviction, okay? The conviction, Connecticut does that. But there are 3 states that prohibit possession or purchase when there has been an emergency domestic violence restraining order for stalking. Connecticut does not do that. Nebraska does. I don't know, so that's another one. There are 2 more states that prohibit possession or purchase after a stalking domestic violence protective order is placed and there's been a notice and a hearing. But Connecticut isn't one of them either, but West Virginia is. So we do have some work to be done, and there are ways that we can make, usually women, it's not always women, but statistically speaking, women are by far more affected by this. And there is still room for improvement, both from the domestic violence legislation side and especially when it intersects with gun violence. And I know this group has always been very supportive of that intersection, and I'm happy to be here. I was proud to be a Moms Demand Gun Sense candidate. And do you have any questions, anybody, about domestic violent gun information that I haven't covered here? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that. That was, again, some really eye-opening information about the things that we can do together. There's so much that we can do. Before we wrap this up, I did want to take a moment to say we do have two co-leaders here. Corrine, thank you for all of your work for tonight. And Jennifer Gorman, somewhere, she's the Wizard of Oz back there behind the curtain making everything happen. So thank you. We are the four people who kind of run this farming, so we'd love some help. If anyone is inspired by what you're hearing tonight. Any ideas?
Really want to bust into Avon and Camden this year. That's my goal.
Yeah. So we would like to take any questions. Does anyone have any questions that you thought of throughout the night that haven't been answered by any one of the?
I have two little boys who have friends that have Nerf guns and squirt guns, and there's a reality that even in school, there's sometimes squirt guns and stuff during the summer. What is the best way to approach the conversation with a play gun and what you say about that? Because I do ask about what happens if you go to a friend's house. We have that conversation, I have a conversation with the parent, if there's a play date, if on a rare occasion that I'm not there, even when I am there, I ask. So is there any information about the best conversation to have with your children regarding things like Nerf guns, play guns, things like that?
Do you have any, do you want to take that? It's my sense that children seem to be able to differentiate Nerf gun, shooting friends, and real gun violence. I think if you keep the conversations that, we're not using words like we're killing each other, but we're just kind of tagging each other, I think that kind of keeps it more of a play level. But would you agree, Alex?
Yeah, I don't know the AAP is strong on the data on media violence is like, the AAP thinks it's stronger than it might actually be, but there's probably some correlation between media violence and actual violence that I don't know those data as well. I really aggressively don't know the data on Nerf guns.
I'd just like to add, as a mom, to always trust your instincts, and if something doesn't make you comfortable, then you should feel free to share that with your kids, as far as how to say, whatever it may be, do you want to play something else, or, whatever it may be. We don't recommend we don't have any facts behind that, but, trust yourself, I think it's important for us to do that. Anyone else?
So, John shared out there the pamphlet of upcoming things for 2020. Possibilities, okay. Are there things that this group can do to get those up to the forefront? Like if we were to look at some of those proposals to sort of push those up to the forefront and gain more support for those?
Sure.
And how does that happen? Like how does that work?
I would encourage you to, even though I'm a gun sense legislator, to load up my email box. People think, oh, well, I have to write to you, John. I know that you're already on our side. Well, I need to have 1,000 emails to go to my leadership and show them, wow, this is important. So email all of you, whether it's me or you're from Canton or another town, email our Speaker of the House. If you need information, I can provide you guys the contact people. Leadership of the Judiciary Committee, which has cognizance largely on gun violence related issues. But if you want certain bills to be raised, certainly raise your voice, because being a short session, there's a lot of competition on legislation.
So just to follow up on that, how does that work in terms of timing? right?
Like now.
Yeah, right, because that's what I was sure, so we should.
Yeah, our bill
identify.
submission deadline is, and if you want me to, I don't know if you've reached out to the Judiciary Committee yet, but if you want me to submit your agenda to the Judiciary Chairman, I will gladly do that. So asking them to bring up your bills.
On a state level, we do have this is the local group we are here in Farmington, and we cover every Farmington, Avon, Canton, Burlington, anybody who wants to come. But there is a state organization, of course, and we work with them. They, as far as Moms Demand Action goes, we have certain bills that we are really advocating for. I guess what I'm trying to say is not related to what you're saying, but to the larger group, as long as I've got your information, we'll get in touch with you when it's time and say, this is what we need help with. If this is important to you, can you write a postcard? Can you send an email? Can you make a phone call? And we'll get that to you. But on the short term, maybe we have to follow up on that, what we need to do.
Yeah, if you have, I don't know if you're gonna mimic exactly the national agenda, or do you have your own local state agenda?
Well, we do, right,
So,
because of Jillian's law, right, that's a local or state.
So whatever they are, feel free to use them as a
Okay.
vehicle.
Thank you.
But I guess the point is to everybody in the room that, especially if you're not from Simsbury, is to constantly call and email and, ask legislators to come into your home, meet for coffee, say this is important to you, especially, as elections in 2020 come up. Say that I'm a Moms Demand Action member and I vote, and this is important, so.
Anyone else have a question?
I just wonder, as you guys go around the Farmington Valley, I'm interested in knowing what can be done at the town level, right? So we have that project, Child Safe that John brought up, through the police department for gun walks, I guess it is if you're a gun owner. But as you, maybe I stay connected to see what you see other towns doing, whether it's education, or just something to keep people informed. Because I don't know I know the state is.
And then they have a Sandy Hook promise the Board of Ed has, but, certainly that's a good idea to explore what towns can do.
I think the Be Smart campaign. The Be Smart
Okay,
campaign
right.
rolled out
Yeah,
locally.
but it's spreading the word on that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what's great about the tabling events, if we can just get more, tabling events. We're operating on a zero budget, so I mean, some of these things you have to purchase, so you have to figure out fundraising for that, but I really just like to, like I said, messaging is really important to me. People don't know gun deaths are largely suicide. A lot of it is suicidal behavior, and that this about the red flag laws. I mean, people don't even know about these laws. That there's there's purpose, and we're not just people out there trying to rip your guns away and clutching our pearls. We want to be sensible. We want to be logical. We want to make ways to affect things like, that rate of toddlers handling, it's just ridiculous, it's just mind-blowing ridiculous, so we can affect these things.
But to Wendy's point, all politics being local, I don't know if you're doing road shows to Board of Selectmen meetings, but I'm sure Wendy would probably welcome you to do a presentation.
Yeah, so last year we showed up at for Wear Orange and got town Remembrance Day. So during that week, you try and let as many things orange as possible.
We had a proclamation.
Yeah, so I would really love to bust into Avon and Canton, obviously, because they have Leslie Hill who, voted against it with gun sense legislation. Or we have, John, who's gun sense savvy, Leslie Hill, I thought all they were all bad ideas on them. So I would like to bust into our area right now.
So great question. Let's stay in touch on that.
Yeah, okay.
Tabling is when we go to celebrate Granby or we go to Simsbury Celebrates and we just put a table up and we take our shirts and we say, this is what we're about. Are you interested in learning more about it? And doing that town by town takes a lot of volunteers. So far it's just 4 or 5 of us who kind of go to everything. So we'd love to have them.
Do you take donations?
We take donations through
our.
our.
Do that, yeah. It's a statewide one, and maybe we can get money,
Is
but
there membership or?
This is a good question.
no, this is a pure volunteer supporter. Even Shannon Watts doesn't get paid.
So on Moms Demand, the national website, we are taking donations. We have a state page, but that's a good question. Do we have a local to help us?
Yeah, we've discussed in a really public forum figuring out how to have fun so we could do things like buy a spot at the chili fest, which I would love. If anybody wants to volunteer for that role of figuring out how to manage donations and that would be fantastic.
Did you have a question?
I was just gonna say, your comment on, Meredith commented about how Leslie Hill had voted against all the gun sense legislation that we got, but elections matter. You know, Leslie used to be the first selectwoman in Canton. There's a new select person there. And I'm sure that new selectman will be far more receptive to a gun sense message and presentation. So little things like who is the selectman and who are you electing? It's not just big pieces of legislation, but even being open to helping publicize and raise awareness. Elections really matter.
Thank you.
They do matter, and there are a variety of different, well, first of all, when somebody comes knocking at your door, gun sense, I need my little list because, you know, my brain is somewhere else and they come and I'm like, Also though, if there's a candidates night and you're at people, okay, I moderate the one in Canton. I'm begging for questions. I'm asking my questions because I'm not getting questions and it's hard when you don't live in the town to, you know, to word them. But have some good questions. Do you support not just sort of vague gun sense legislation, but specific ones, funding for be safe or whatever the act was, yeah, that sort of thing. But that really,
That's a great idea. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Come prepared, right? Come prepared.
yes.
Are there any other questions?
I did look into the payment, like how,
great.
and I have information, just from the back and forth I had.
Do you want to share it or we have to
it's
digest it first?
definitely not succinct.
Okay.
The answer is not clear still, however, but there's more detail.
Well, I just want to, I don't know if Meredith,
No, thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming in. We hope to see everybody's face again.
Are you expecting
It's
something
another
like
major
that?
election year, so we want to
Yes.
get everybody active.
But soon.
So yeah, I just want to tag onto that. We're just getting started here. We're a brand new group at Farmington. We're one of the newest ones in the state of Connecticut, maybe. We're just getting started. There's so much more information to share. We can't put it all out on one night. So we hope to see you again, the new folks. We hope to see you again. We're going to keep you engaged. If you left your information, we're going to let you know what's coming, and we're going to let you know when the next meetings are, how you can get involved. If you have any ideas, please reach out to us as well. And thank you so much for coming, everybody. One other thing, thank you so much for accommodating. We had such a great response. I wanted to say next time, bring a friend. I promise we'll have more seats.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.